Good morning, Dan.
Pramukh, it's good to see you, my friend. I'm glad we're
Likewise,
doing this.
likewise. I'm well, and how are you?
I'm good. It feels like this has been months in the making, and gosh, based on the topics we're going to discuss, maybe centuries in the making. Who knows? We'll see where we go with this one.
No, look, I'm excited to connect with you and get to know a little bit about, who you are and how you think about leadership and the work that you do at PeopleReign. But I think just to set the context, I'd love to get to know you beyond what's out there in LinkedIn and what's published. Share a little bit about, what makes Dan Dan and what is, in Dan's own words, unique about him.
Yeah, I appreciate the question. So going back the 30 plus years that I've been in this space, applying AI and machine learning to delivering better human experiences at work, I've always believed that work should be a celebration of the best of what humans can deliver. I don't believe it's a four-letter word. I
Mhm.
believe that every employer has a responsibility, an obligation to create a safe place where every employee can do the best work of their life. And it turns out there's a small but growing community of people on what I call Team Human
Mhm.
that feel that way. So kind of the through line, not just my career, but kind of my philosophy and what I feel like is my why. The reason I was put on the planet is to shift how we think about the very complicated relationship that humans have with machines. So
Mhm.
if you go all the way back, a couple hundred years, the 18th century, the first industrial revolution, there were Luddites, and throughout history, there have been themes of humans wrestling with what it means to be a human partnering with machines. And I think that those who have been on the right side of innovation have tended to be the ones who, really reap the benefits. And now we're at another very important precipice. And so I think it's more important than ever that we have conversations like this. And um, yeah, happy to talk more about PeopleReign and what we do to make that future a reality. But I'm also just thrilled to be here having the conversation with you because you're one of those leaders who inspires me. So I'd also love to make sure we have equal time to turn the mic back over to you.
Yeah, no, thank you, Dan. There's a few things that you said that resonate clearly with me. I think the human part of who we are and what we do. Um, for me, I start by always saying life is good, right?
Mm.
And I say this in a very broad sense, but also in a very narrow sense, right? Um, we were getting together over the weekend and we were celebrating one of our friends' 50th birthday. And we kind of went around the room and we talked about what is important for each one of us, right, as we celebrate life. And one of the clear things that came out was that how do we look at what we do in our waking hours, be it at work, be it at home, be it at family, and how do you see joy and meaning, right? I love what you said, right? The whole experience that we go through, be it in the workplace or being with ourselves in our personal lives, I think defines who we are. And I'll be honest with you, when I first met you, I think the way you articulated the whole aspect of experiences, right? In your case, workplace experiences, the connection between machines and people, that is super fascinating. And I think as we think through the next 30 minutes of our conversation and we talk about leaders, I want to just say a few things and get your thoughts on this. Uh, Leadership is at a crisis. Again, this is Pramukh's view. We're not at a crisis. Leadership is struggling in the new world of technology innovation. No, we're not struggling. And I say this in a very dramatic fashion because a whole host of it is mindset around what's happening around us. Because I think there are three parts to everything we do, right? It's your mindset, your skill set, and the tool set that you have. And I know that's not new, but many times I think it's the mind that leads you to who you want to be and what you want to do. And so I wake up every morning in my own sphere and I start defining what success at the end of the day means to me as a leader. And for me, Dan, it's not the title that I carry. It's not the designation that someone's given me. It's not the name tag that I say Pramukh Jeyathilak dash dash dash. No, it is what are the actions and outcomes that I can deliver for my customers and for my employees. That's it. I define leadership as action and outcomes and not position and titles, right? When you think about it that way, all of what's going around you, what's happening around you in the world, you know, comes across as very different in the context of the opportunities that we have, in the context of the challenges that we have. We're not at a crisis. We're looking at it as an opportunity, and we're driving outcomes that impacts a group of people. So that's how I think about this whole aspect of leadership in the context of all that's happening. I'd love to see what your thoughts are, hear what your thoughts are on this leadership generally before we kind of dive into some of the specifics.
Well, it's such an important topic, and the role of leaders, what it means to be a leader, as you indicated, is changing.
Mm,
Um, Life is good, as you said, but you know what? It's not just the celebrations in the sense that Pramukh and Dan's lives are good. Um, there's a broader meaning to that statement. It's very impactful, which is life, just the joy that we get from being alive, and
mm,
what it means to be sentient, and to be able to smell a rose, and even sometimes feel pain, and the highs and lows of life. Life is good. It's good to be alive. And as we have this conversation about leadership, and maybe even
mm,
work and work life and what comes next, what it means to be on Team Human is to always believe that life is good, and realize that you can pinch a bot and it feels no pain. And even if a bot outputs credible nonsense, it's still nonsense,
mm.
and it requires human intuition and empathy and critical thinking and rational judgment. That's the essence of humanness. And so when I think about leadership, the role is changing, because for the first time, when you, as a leader, or to your point, we're all leaders.
Mm,
Leaders. It's not a title on a badge.
mm,
It's not the diploma on the wall. We're all leaders because someone is looking to us to be a role model. And the way we earn that informal title of being a leader, being someone's role model, is by having empathy. And more than ever, we all should realize that when you walk into your place of work, when you're interacting with your team, um, everyone is looking to you for how you process
mm.
all the complicated messages that are going in and around the workplace. And so, um, what it means to be a leader today is to realize everyone's got a little bit of added weight on their shoulders. They're wondering if their career, their role, is it obsolete? Is their job going away? Maybe there's an opportunity for them to take on more responsibility. Um, but more than ever, now is a good time to think about why life is good. And in this complicated time, what it means is use every opportunity to lift someone up.
Right.
Share with them a new skill. Share with them that a future of work that involves embracing machines. Um, we can hold those two ideas in our heads at once, that it's okay to embrace technology and embrace humanness at work. And so be that reason that someone smiles every day, and realize that the bot's never going to smile. It's never going to have that human interaction that you can have. And look for every just serendipitous opportunity. Create those magic moments that only
Mm.
humans can create. That's the new definition of leadership.
No, very, very well said, Dan. And there's something you said there. I'd love to get your thoughts on. I'll share mine as well. You said, the definition of how work is getting done is changing. To me, the definition of a worker is also changing. What's been your experience, and how do you think about articulating that to the people you work with?
So oftentimes work is measured as a function of input and output,
Hmm.
contributions to some outcome. Um, Almost by definition, that makes workers seem like machines,
Mm,
because those are terms that we use to describe machine output. Um, the thing that's innate to the human experience is figuring out what are the right outcomes to deliver. Not how many widgets we can produce, but are they the right widgets?
mm,
And and what it means to be a worker, in this new age, is to have an opinion, and to be able to question things that seem like just dogma
mm,
over the years. um, I think it's really, we're the first generation where we're going to be empowered If we appreciate the unique opportunity that we're given right now, we'll be empowered to figure
Mhm.
out, how to generate more of the thing that generates the most value for our organization or for our team. And one of the things that I hope that we do a better job of incorporating into educational curriculum, starting with kindergarten and on up in the United States at least, um, is what it means to have free will and what it means to be able to think independently and question maybe what you're being asked to do. That's not insubordination. That's just the way that we, as a global society, that's the way we demonstrate respect for each other. That we're all in a position where we can maybe exceed that maybe the narrow boundaries that someone thought would confine us.
Mm.
Um, so what's a worker? A worker is it's not a cog in a machine anymore,
Mm.
because the cogs and the machines are really, really good at what they're doing. But what it means to be a worker is to produce an outcome that a machine can't produce. And a lot of times that involves thinking differently about the inputs and the outputs, and more importantly, the outcomes, because that's where there will always need to be, human intuition to be able to improve the quality of the work. That's the new definition of what a worker is.
Yeah, no, really well said. And I take inspiration from, being a father to two sons, and I learn a lot about life through them and also what it is to lead, right? I think for me, the whole definition of a leader and thereby worker is, do you define yourself as someone who leads or as someone who's open to be led as well, right? Do you want to define yourself as someone who leads, or do you want to define yourself that is open to being led? And I think with technology in the workplace, and let's not forget intergenerational workforces today, I think definitions of how work gets done is different than it was even 5 years ago, even 10 years ago. Where work gets done, remote versus in person. So I think we are in this whole interesting crossroads. And I started by saying, look, we're not in a crisis. I like to say that we are at multiple junctions and crossroads because of a few things. I think this whole notion of this or that, this versus that, I think, in my view, is not applicable. I think we live in the world of an and, this and that, remote and in person, machines and humans, outcomes and processes. So for me, I think the way I've evolved as a leader is to try to embrace the and mindset as opposed to or. Because when you embrace that and mindset, everyone around you matters. People matter as much as machines matter. So I think for me, that's the change that I'm seeing. And every time I talk to leaders out there, I try to kind of encourage them and get them to think of the and model. Because let me give you a simple example, right? Hey, many, many years ago, I'm obviously aging myself. When I started, the role of a manager or a leader was to help with managing processes. Do this, do that. We didn't have playbooks. We didn't have chat GPT that we could get to. We didn't have the internet, but we depended on someone, right? So we had this whole formal relationship with someone who was our manager or a leader, and they helped with processes. Do this, 1 + 1 = 3, follow this path. But then if I were to shift over a couple of years, tens of years, leaders are now defining outcomes. So I've seen that shift from processes to outcomes. They're not mutually exclusive. It's an and. If you can define the outcomes, let the worker define the process. Let technology help them define the process. So for me, I think the biggest challenge today, at least for some of us who've been around a while, to move away from that process management to outcome management.
But how does Pramukh the father have a version of this conversation with your sons?
I think there are a couple of things here, Dan. One is being open-minded of different processes, right? Gone are the days when you can say, this is the one and the only way of doing things. This is the way we're solving problems. But I think being open has given me the opportunity to look at multiple options. The second thing the father in me has taught me is to create what I call what if scenarios. If we do this, here's what the outcome is. What if we do this? What if we don't do this? Right? So I've learned that life has taught me to create this what if scenarios. Third, the thing that I've learned being a father is failure is an option. Because if you don't try, you're never going to know whether you're going to succeed or not. So for me, the whole aspect of looking at the and is failure is an option, success and failure. Let's give it a try. Let's not die not trying. So I think I look at what life as an opportunity gives you, either as a father, as a partner, as a spouse, as a leader, as a worker, is embracing what's around us. Now, we intentionally haven't broadened the whole focus on AI and technology, which we will. But I think we're getting to this point where we have to be open to embracing things around us. How do we live in the world of and? Because there are leaders that I'm talking to who are, oh my God, I'm so behind. I want to jump on this bandwagon, and this is the only way that I go. I sometimes step back and say, hey, look, technology is a lever, but there are other levers that you have in the organization as well. The culture that you built, the skills that you have, the whole mindset around intergenerational workforces. You have assets already in place. And how do you think of all of those and the implications of technology? So for me, it's the element of and is something that I have internalized in the last couple of years.
It's harder as a parent than it has been in the past because I have two girls in high
Mm.
school. I don't know, what age are your boys?
27 and 24, the young
Okay, you're
adults.
ahead of me. Well, I mean, look, I mean, you open the New York Times or any publication, and splashed all over the headlines is the death of the entry level job, and
Yes.
there's nothing but negativity flowing down, through the education system,
Hmm.
and I think that's irresponsible of journalists because for every headline about Microsoft laying off whatever it is, a half a percent to 1% of their of employees, or IBM a few hundred layoffs in HR. You don't hear the stories about all
Mm.
the hiring that's happening and the new products that are being co-innovated with AI. I mean the diseases that the population will never suffer from. And when you think about all of the humans that are
Mm.
going to be required to bring these products to market and
Mm.
and be part of the co-innovation process, it's quick to agree with the World Economic Forum, which says there'll be a net 72 million new jobs created by AI in the next decade. Even though some may be lost, it may be that the ones that are lost aren't good roles for humans in the first place. So
Mm.
um, I think it's very easy to stay positive when you filter the data through the lens of what's the objective of the author,
Mm.
given that as a culture we do um, grip onto some things that people consider fear mongering,
Yeah.
but as a leader, I mean you've spent decades in and around the halls of power, in leadership roles. How do we get that message out to more leaders that embrace positivity,
Mm.
talk about the new opportunities that are emerging from AI as opposed to maybe the jobs that will be eliminated?
Mm. I think there's a few things, Dan, for me. One is role modeling. I think we as leaders have to role model behaviors that we want of others. So I think it starts from there. Uh, the other kind of way of thinking about what is happening in the workplace is this concept of trust. And there was a senior leader who very famously said that, good intentions alone don't work, but outcomes do, which also then means that you've got to trust the system in which you work in and trust that people are pulling in the right direction and pulling in a consolidated manner, right? The other practical element of, I think, what is happening in the workplace today is, and you said it in the context of headcount, we're letting go 5,000 people. So there's a fear that we've got to do more with less, just as human bodies. But that's an evolution, right? That's an evolution that we are going through. You live and work in a business We are helping organizations look at efficiencies, keeping the human element in play, but doing it faster, quicker, in a meaningful manner, right? And so I think it's not swaying one way or the other, but staying true to who you are. There are certain organizations who are so clear on what they want to achieve in the next 24 to 36 months. The market's growing at this rate. We want to grow faster than the market. We are a multi-product company. We want to consolidate and be a single product company. We are very local, but we want to go global. So I think my question to you, and I'm asking this question myself, is as organizations have clear intent and outcomes, do we as people in the organizations have an intent or outcome that's different now than it was 10 years ago?
Um, yes. And the reason I say yes is because I think for the first time, culturally, organizationally, supported by great technology, we have the ability to empower workers. I believe that we're right on the cusp, probably within 18 months, of giving back every employee about a day a week. And in that day a week, just as humans, as part of the workforce, we can choose. You can do 5 days worth of work in 4 days and maybe, take the extra day off, pursue a hobby, be a better parent, take care of a loved one. There's certainly things that we could use the time back for. We could also use the opportunity to work a fifth day potentially and maybe make 20% more or contribute 20% more back. But in terms of the opportunities that this creates for employees, it really is the first time when you can think about everything that at PeopleReign we call it friction, all the friction at work, the things that you have to do, compliance tasks, and you hate doing, but you got to do it anyway. It's like a tax you pay just for being an employee. And I believe the future of work is extracting all of that friction out of work, because what remains is the work that people love, that we're great at, that we're passionate about. And like the workplace that I would like my girls to graduate into is one where they're surrounded by people who are passionate, and every day they show up as their best selves at work because the friction gets removed. So when I think about like PeopleReign, that's our mission: give every employee back about a day a week of productive time to be their best selves at work. And I think about why I love this partnership with you and Patty and the TalentLign team is because we're both pursuing really a passion that we have, a higher cause. And, we feel like just, helping one team, one organization, one employee at a time is a way to put a little dent in the universe. And I think, we have an obligation right now to be part of the change that we want to see in the world. And, it starts at a very micro level. But I want every employee, the next generation, the current generation, to really feel empowered. That it's okay to feel like you deserve to feel trusted and valued and respected. And it's okay to feel like you can do the best work of your life in your current job.
Yeah, no, plus one to all of that. And that's why I think TalentLign as a name is also very significant for us. How do you drive business outcomes through talent? How do you align business outcomes through talent? Let's not forget the human element of what organizations have historically been built on. There's something that I've been battling, Dan, for a while conceptually, right? I started my early career with Anderson Consulting, which is now Accenture, right?
As did I. We share that background, Pramukh.
We do. That's why I want to get to your thoughts. If you recall those early days, we talked about the concept of a knowledge worker, and what set an Accenture apart was thought leadership, right? Dan was smarter than Pramukh because he could think differently. He brought a new perspective into place, and his creativity was being played out in the kind of work we did. So for me, thought leadership, intellectual horsepower. You see those words? You recall those words? Are they still relevant and real with so much of technology sometimes taking away the concept of thought leadership, the concept of a knowledge worker?
I love that you brought up that topic. It's such an important
Mm,
and related topic to everything we've been discussing. Thought leadership is giving way to thought synthesis. So
mm,
it's more about experiencing the world and assimilating ideas from different sources and questioning what's truth and building on your version of the truth, and really, being comfortable asking hard questions. But it's thought synthesis. And
mm,
in terms of, what we used to refer to, back in our Anderson/Accenture days as thought leadership, it's now emotional leadership.
mm,
And the things that distinguish the leaders, the reasons why I do believe even businesses like Accenture, which some are, writing off as artifacts of the past. I feel like, bringing that, awareness, that empathy, that emotional, or the EQ
mm,
to work, and training next generation about how to embrace, those skills, or those qualities that make us uniquely human. I feel like that's going to be, the role of what in the previous generation we called a thought leader. And I
mm,
think I frequently say there's never been a better time to get a liberal arts degree.
mm,
Study philosophy, study art histories, study, civil society, and civics. And
mm,
that's more important than learning, or memorizing, organic chemistry compounds.
mm,
Those are the things that are really going to distinguish the next generation of leaders in the workplace. And I hope that we rapidly move beyond thinking that, recall of facts, or
mm,
what we in the past might have called thought leadership, is really, that will be commoditized. But in its place will, these very important concepts, I think, will emerge as
mm,
the skills that distinguish the experts from the
mm,
novices.
mm. No, you said it really, really well. And now, if you kind of think about how do leaders lead in a changing environment like this, right? I think the mindset of a generalist is so important, right? I think historically we've decided being a specialist defines who you are. But I think there's something in what you said made me think that being a generalist as a leader is not bad. How do you take the art and the science together? How do you combine liberal art thinking with inorganic chemistry, right? And how do we bring that together? And if can people think collectively, imagine the magic that we could create, right? Yeah, and so no, that is so important. I think for all of us who are leaders and are battling with that, we have to be bold enough to be able to embrace what's happening out there, to go with the times. Because one of the things that I'd love to get your thoughts, and I have a few thoughts on this, is how do you keep up with time, right? How do you keep up? This is a really interesting concept of how do we adapt and evolve with time. The thing, the thing that you talked about, thought synthesis, leadership synthesis, idea synthesis, as opposed. How do we as leaders keep up with that? What are things that we should be doing or not doing now?
It's such a philosophical
Mm,
concept. I don't think of time as being something that you look at your watch to determine.
mm,
I think we should all measure the passage of time based on our contributions to the world. And so I
mm,
think time is an abstract concept that gives us a chance to think about our own personal why. And we should measure time, uh, on more kind of a cosmic scale. Think
mm,
about, not what did I do in a day, but what am I here on the planet to do?
mm,
And every day is an opportunity to chip away at your why.
mm,
Um, I had this great conversation about the philosophy of time. A gentleman named Matt Martin, who's a CEO of a great company called Clockwise,
mm,
that is trying to use AI and use technology. This is I host a podcast called AI and the Future of Work. And Matt was talking about, how can you reimagine the calendar, the work
mm,
calendar, um, using AI to maybe suggest, based on what I know about you, what would make for the most fulfilling day for you, and maybe, insert, time to pause, and time for deep thinking, and time for the things that you say based on your actions and based on what you've expressed matters most to you. Maybe there's a way that, you know hey, take what I shared a little bit ago about the extra day a week.
mm,
Wouldn't it be nice if in those margins instead of dealing with trouble tickets or enrolling in benefits or things that, kind of represent the worst of the human condition, what if instead you had AI kind of coaching you through the process of, making the best use of your time based on really what is fulfilling to you as a human? I know that's not really where you intended to take the question about time,
No,
but I
but
think
it's yeah.
it's important to think of it as, a level above just kind of the tyranny of the immediate.
There's something which you said that I think I want to get your thoughts on, and you're a deep thinker, and I think you're paving the way around the whole future of work, right? There's a lot of discussions that you had. I've listened to some of your thoughts around that. There's one thing that I've always been curious about, Dan, is the past of the work or the present of the work. Are those things not relevant anymore as we think about future? Do we need to stop and see what has got us here, and are there learnings and lessons that we have to define the future? Look, we started by also talking about the definition of a worker and how work gets done, right? So we talk about that evolution, and we are able to articulate that evolution reasonably well. This is how work got done 10 years ago, 15 years ago, 20 years ago. Um, can we use the same lens around work? Is there a past of the work that there's merit in us talking about, or no, everything is future of work?
I'll go first, but I want to hear your
Well,
perspective as
so,
well. So, work is a very foundational part of the human experience.
mm,
And throughout history, um, work has always served a purpose. It gives us purpose in life. And I
mm,
think, as we can debate concepts like universal basic income and, what if you didn't have to work? I don't believe that would be a good thing.
mm,
I think the problem is that there are too many connotations of that four-letter word that are negative. And so if we embrace the fact that we're at our best when we have purpose, when we have meaning, when we have work, um, then we can go back through history and look at how the definition of work has changed and extract away some of the things that give it a negative connotation.
mm,
In certain places, at certain times, I mentioned like, the Industrial Revolution, Great Britain, 18th century, um, a lot of work was dangerous
mm,
and a lot of work was boring. In the field of AI, a lot of times we talk about the three Ds of work. If it's dull, dirty, or dangerous,
mm,
let AI do it.
mm,
The
mm,
stuff that remains is good for humans. So I think it's okay to look back through a historical lens and say, here's what gave work a bad name. But if instead, the lesson from the past is, what if we could automate away the dull, dirty, and dangerous tasks, then a new version of work emerges that is consistent with that definition I shared of work giving us purpose, work being part of the human condition. But we can evolve beyond the point where it earned a reputation for being the place where you might get harmed, or a place where you might not be able to provide for your family because of the working
mm,
conditions. If we think beyond that, that's the future of work that I think gets back to the core of what
mm,
for centuries, millennia, work was always intended to be.
mm, mm.
What are your thoughts? You brought up the topic, and
Yeah,
I'm
no,
glad you did. Yeah.
I'll tell you, I'm taking a humanistic view to this, whether it's past, present, or future. Dan, for me, this is how Pramukh thinks. Work brings discipline. Work is an ethic. Work is a mindset. Work has a lot of connotations around positive behaviors that I carry with me today and will carry into the future. So for me, I always remind myself, as much as we talk about the future of work and the future of working, to me, those are two different things. For me, there are elements around what work meant to me 30 years ago. Yes, the need to have recognition, social recognition, the whole aspect of rewards, all of that, is constant. But for me, there's a lot of personal attributes that I connect to work. Again, it is just a coincidence that work has given me a title, work has given me a position. but I don't index on that. I always tell my wife and kids, when I get buried, no one's going to put on my tombstone, here lies the CEO of Talent, Rain, or People Talent, or this company or that company, or no, because these companies come and go. But I want to be honest with myself around the things that define me, which demonstrate who I am. And I think if you bring the same connotation back into the workplace, work brings discipline. Work to me is effort. Work
It's a nice
means
way of
the
saying
ups
it.
and the downs. When I say life is good, let's just be clear. Life is not always good, even for me, but it's what constitutes life and the opportunities that define what life is. So that to me is constant, right? So when I talk about the future of work and future of working, I think it's got to do with the and. It's what we carried with us and what the future is going to be providing. It's the element of being in person and working in a digitally enabled environment. It's the human behind the technology and the technology behind the human. So I started putting my thoughts around the human behind the technology behind humans. It's the and I think when we think about it, I think it all comes together. The other thing that I personally struggle with all the time is simplifying my thinking. There's so much happening around us. Things are moving at such speed, and we have such bright people and such helpful technology. How can I simplify things? How can I simplify things? Again, I don't think I've got to a good place as yet. It's still work in progress. But I'd love to hear your thoughts, as to how all of this comes together for you.
Um, I'm frequently asked versions of that question
Hmm.
in the context of work when I'm
Hmm.
dealing with other leaders or talking to leadership teams. Um, and they often ask for where do I start? We believe everything you're saying. Humanize work with AI, all the platitudes, right? They
Right.
make sense, but where do we start?
Hmm.
Um, and you use the word humanism. I love that term or that approach. Um, and what I'll frequently say to groups of leaders is um, think about the way to embrace humanity, and then walk back from there and figure out what are the things that we're being asked our teams to do that are dehumanizing.
Hmm.
And even though it seems kind of abstract, when you ask a question in that way, it becomes very easy to say it's the waiting on hold. It's the
Hmm.
fact that I'm in a remote office, and the home office doesn't speak my language.
Hmm.
I can only get service during these hours, or I'm never really sure what's being deducted from my paycheck. Like things
Hmm.
that those are the things that create unnecessary cognitive load for employees. And so um, when I think about coaching others through that process of that realization, or that you know that achievement of their vision for work and work life, I just think about where's their friction. And the closer you are to the sources of the friction, and being comfortable asking the questions, then it becomes very
Hmm.
clear how to improve conditions for employees. But the thing to appreciate is that, unlike any time in the past, we have incredible technology as partners.
Hmm.
So if we're empathetic enough to ask the question and really care about solving problems, eliminating friction for our teams, then we can be the ones who partner with technology and don't use it to dehumanize or threaten jobs, but really use it to make work life a delightful experience.
Right. And look, I've said this even when you were not in the room, Dan. The work that you all do at PeopleReign appeals to me, right? I have the option of working with a whole host of people, but I think there are certain things that you said. How do you bring happiness in the workplace? How do you have engaged employees? How can you increase workplace experiences? For me, I think it needs to be emphasized that all of those things are such critical elements of the workplace now than it ever has been before. So I think some of the work that you are doing and the opportunity for us to partner, I think is important. We always, and I know we've got about 5 minutes, and I want to shift a little bit into this whole aspect of HR, the role of HR. We talked about leaders more broadly. Um, what do we think about the HR function? And I know there's a question on what one piece of advice that we would have for HR leaders navigating this moment of change. I always say one thing because that's the way I am: be curious, curiosity. I think many of us live in this bubble, which we think is not going to break. I think we hide behind the fact that we work for very successful companies. I think we hide behind the fact that we are infallible. But I'm always reminded of Malcolm Gladwell's book, The Tipping Point. We all, like us in life, organizations hit a tipping point. So I think being curious, knowing what's happening out there, being open, and willing to invest in hearing from each other. I the biggest frustration for me doing what I do right now, other than obviously working on my own and not with a team of people in person, is how closed people are to giving time to listen to learn. How little effort we make in reaching out to each other, being connected with each other, and listening to each other and learning from each other. I think we're missing a great opportunity. So I would say my one, I don't like to use the word advice. Here's what I'm doing right now. I'm being curious and keeping my mind open to learning from others because I feel that I'm not in this alone.
Well
What's
said.
yours?
Well said. I always tell my team, be a learn-it-all. Don't be a
Yeah.
know-it-all.
Yeah.
Always be learning. With respect to the kinds of things that I coach HR leaders on, um, it starts with something that's maybe unorthodox. And I say, first, forget everything you thought you knew about HR,
Hmm.
because what it means to be in HR moving forward is not to be a payroll clerk. It's not to be a benefits admin. What the organization needs from you is the willingness to both question your why and think about or ask your employees, what's their why? What are
Hmm.
they trying to get out of their work experience? Because the good news is um, the payroll clerking, they're going to be better and better tools
Hmm.
to answer questions about payroll or enroll you in your benefits. But what there will not be technology for is to have those conversations about why are you here? Like really, why are you here?
Hmm. Hmm.
And if we desire, the most productive organizations, will be the ones that invest in the best employee experiences. If you, and you should, if you're a people leader, that should be part of your philosophy.
Hmm.
The way to be the best people leader is to really think about what's going through, the mind and the day of your team members, and take it upon yourself to
Hmm.
not spend the time that you were spending on some of the mundane tasks, and instead invest that in these very um, important and impactful conversations with employees. I think that's a
Hmm.
great example of what we do with the productivity dividend that we're going to get back from technologies like AI. And
Hmm.
that's why, kind of to wrap up where we started, I celebrate the partnership with you and Patty and TalentLign, because at PeopleReign, we're always looking for visionary leaders who
Hmm.
can help us create this world that we want to be a part of. And I think it starts with your vision for what it takes to be a human partnering with technology. And I just really excited as we kick off this partnership to do more of this, and really come back, and when we have the next version of this conversation, have some meaningful metrics to celebrate. And that will be the ultimate test of how we're doing
Hmm.
together.
No, thank you. It's been an absolute pleasure. I know we're at a time. So from my side, this is a great conversation. We can go on forever, but um, yeah, I'm glad we got together, and I look forward to many more such sessions in future, Dan.
This was wonderful. I know that our teams will be following up and
Mm.
making sure that everyone who's been part of the live stream will have access to some of the content that we've discussed, and hopefully we'll get a chance to meet many of you that have been on live stream. And Pramukh and your team, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure putting this one together.
Likewise. Thanks, Dan. Have a good rest of the day.
You too.
Okay.